morning, everyone. Eric Burkhart, Penn State University. You've already heard from some of my colleagues here this morning talking about gold seal and other non-timber forest products that we work with. So my lab largely works with these products as well. Today I'm going to talk about American ginseng, maybe a little bit of a different spin. Kind of take inspiration from this from Kat Harrison. So if you've never seen her book, Tending the Wild, which I'm sure everybody's seen this, or read it hopefully. It's a fantastic book, and so today I'm going to talk just briefly about some of the work that I'm doing in Pennsylvania looking at one of our preeminent non-timber forest products, American ginseng, which most people think of as just simply a wild exploited plant. What I'm going to share today is that this is a very dynamic situation, and this plant is what we might call a semi-domesticate. Many people are manipulating stands of the plant throughout the range of its native species, and so I'm going to delve into that a little bit this morning. So if you're not familiar with American ginseng, it's a very unassuming plant. It's a shade obligate plant that's found throughout forests of eastern North America. The whole plant has active constituents in it known as ginsenicides, which are used in a variety of different applications. Generally speaking, ginseng is considered to be an adaptogen or tonifying plant, has a variety of different health benefits ascribed to it. The root is, specifically the root rhizome, is the part that's used in international commerce in particular. Most of the ginseng that you see on store shelves and things of that nature actually do not come from the wild. It's cultivated material, but there is a significant yet small percentage of the overall international commerce that comes from the wild still and has been harvested from eastern North America for about 300 years. As a result, most states within the range of American ginseng have some sort of conservation concern around the plant, and so there's a whole suite, as you can see, of different types of statuses, ranging from endangered to secure to vulnerable and so on. All the states within the range of American ginseng then struggle to figure out what the exact status is of the plant in their particular political boundaries, and more appropriately to figure out how to best manage this resource. It is a very secretive industry, and because it's very easy to go onto forest lands and harvest it without many people knowing about it, it's a very difficult kind of thing to manage, if you will. In Pennsylvania, which is one of 19 states that exports ginseng from the United States, we're towards the northern end of the range. The trade volume is, as Grady was talking about earlier, similar to gold seal in that we're a little bit on the fringe. But you can see since 1989, since we've been taking records under the CITES requirements of ginseng exports from the United States, the harvest has generally been on a downward trend within Pennsylvania. That, of course, has raised alarms to not just state officials, but federal officials who are looking at trends across the range which tend to mirror this. On the right axis there, you can see the estimated number of plants. So even though Pennsylvania is kind of a minor export state, last year, 2017, somewhere around just under 1,000 pounds harvested of dried material. That still equates to over 100,000 wild plants harvested from the forests of Pennsylvania. I work then with the state of Pennsylvania and ginseng dealers to try and better understand what's going on here with ginseng. Have been for about 15 years. And as part of this process, what I've noticed in a lot of the transaction logs, and so earlier Grady Zyderveen, who you might have heard about, gold seal, was referring to the fact that in licensing programs for ginseng, there are dealer transaction logs that are collected. And this is an example of one of them. And so what happens is if you're a licensed buyer, you are required by law to submit the names and addresses and the nature of the harvest. You can see there are simply two categories for this, and the pointer's not working, but you'll see wild or artificially propagated next to the name of the harvester there. And just two categories under CITES that are recognized, right? So it's either cultivated, which is artificially propagated in CITES speak, or it's wild, and there's no in between. You'll also notice that this harvester, his name is Dennis Colwell, and he actually posted 4 harvests for export from Pennsylvania in this particular year. You'll notice that each of those harvests was significant, over 300 pounds of material that he alone posted out of, let's say, 1,500 pounds for that particular year. And that's because he's actually growing this material, and he's selling it, as you can see, as a wild plant. And there's a lot of reasons why people might choose to do that. Okay, this is all contextualized within the term that you've already heard today, of forest farming or agroforestry. This idea that people are managing the forest and the forest understories for non-timber forest products. This developed very early on with American ginseng. We have records from the Lloyd Library, just down the street, of over 100 years ago in Pennsylvania, people actually cultivating ginseng on forest lands throughout the state of Pennsylvania, Ohio, and New York, for example. And so this is an old idea. Agroforestry is an old idea that has kind of caught on, despite academia, okay, beneath the radar in many parts of places like Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, under CITES, as I mentioned, we don't have many options for actually reporting this at an international level. And so states have been struggling to figure out how they track the development of this particular industry and of husbandry practices in general. One of the models that's been developed, I'll call it the Kentucky model here, is to further expand upon the lexicon at the state level. That is, instead of just calling it wild or artificially propagated, there are these terms such as wild simulated, woods grown, or cultivated. And so we kind of split hairs a little bit and talk about something not as being wild, but as wild simulated, right? And that's a big conversation for many beers or glasses of wine as to how that came about. So states are trying to kind of bifurcate this from a tracking standpoint so they can better report what's going on in their state. But once again, we get to the market, and the market actually just points to two categories. Either the product looks like it's wild or it looks like it's cultivated. Okay? And there are a lot of different reasons that people don't necessarily want to share what it is that they're doing on their forest lands. And let me just highlight a couple of them. First one is price gouging. As I just mentioned, appearance is everything. So the appearance of the product is how it's sold. Most of the wild ginseng goes through Hong Kong and then is distributed from there into Korea and China. It's valued in those parts of the world in traditional Chinese medicine. And as a result, there are different cultural predilections beyond the chemistry of the plant that buyers are looking for. And so the wild product is prioritized in those countries, and there's a premium that's paid for that. So on the left side, we see wild roots, which are distinctive, okay, and that's beyond the purview of this presentation, but they're distinctive, and the prices can range up to $1,000 a pound. On the right side is cultivated product that's widely produced in places like Wisconsin and Ontario, and you can see that the prices are much lower at about $30 a pound. Somewhere in between, there's this kind of gray category of it's neither wild nor cultivated looking, and so the prices are usually somewhere in between as a result. And so people are afraid of reporting what they do, first of all, because if you go to someone who's buying from you, and they're taking your name and address, right, and you're putting down that it's cultivated or artificially propagated, that just took you from potentially $1,000 a pound down to $30 a pound, which is in nobody's economic interest, right? So nobody wants to talk about that. Okay. People are also afraid then, with that kind of value on their forest lands, that I'm writing my name and address down, and this person who's buying it from me knows everybody in the neighborhood and probably knows my name and address. And if I start putting that I'm cultivating this material, maybe someone will come visit my forest lands, right? So theft is a very real issue across Appalachia. This happens to be a case that happened here in southern Ohio just a few years ago in which someone was killed over ginseng management and ginseng theft. We also have, of course, widespread distrust of government in this industry. Nobody's really clear what the government intention is, including people like myself from Penn State, right? And so taxation is number one. Typically people are interested in the fact that they don't have to pay taxes if they don't report this stuff, right? So it's income that they don't have to report. And then finally, for this crowd, we can appreciate that these categories are far too limited in terms of the dynamic interaction that people have with this plant. And so in the real world, it's wild if it looks wild, okay? And it's cultivated if it looks cultivated. And the flip side to that is if I don't know that somebody planted it, it's wild. And if I know somebody planted it, I call it cultivated. So that's just the way that it works. So in that context, my work has kind of been working on the back end instead of the front end of trying to figure out what people are doing. So once again, using a scientific survey, we send these surveys to, on an annual basis, the names and addresses that are recorded in the dealer transaction logs. And by the way, yes, a big percentage of those are fake, okay? But the ones that are real have been responding at a rate of about 17% overall. So about 1 or 2 out of 10 people that we send a survey to will respond over the time. We've been doing this since 2012 in Pennsylvania to try and figure out what people were up to. Okay. In Pennsylvania, as Brian was just talking about with the root report, most of our harvests actually come from the western part of the state. And so these are the respondents that actually participated in the survey today. You'll notice most of those come from the western part of the state, which also overlaps with our ginseng export counties. So these are the top 20 export counties to date in Pennsylvania. And briefly what we have is that when people are asked to report the source of the ginseng that they saw, you can see that the green bar is plants that they found, and the black bar is seeds or transplants that they grow. All of this being reported as wild. When we look at how the ginseng was grown, most of the ginseng, you can see with the green bar, is under a forest canopy, and within that category, the black bar indicates that it's scattered in the wild as if it's a wild plant. So people are out there taking plant material and scattering around the woods. Okay, and this is an example of what that might look like for Pennsylvania. So a managed forest woodlot that doesn't look managed until you start to talk to the owners about what it is they're doing there. Very much agroforestry. Okay, that seed comes from commercial sources that they're working with. So this is how it gets out there. Beneath that beer donation can that you can see there is a root liar. And this seed happens to come from Wisconsin in shade gardens, grown there. And so this person hands out in as little as 1 ounce increments, which can be as many as 500 seeds to these diggers who go out and then push the seed around in the forest. We also have, of course, in the modern era of social media, ways to look at this a little bit more easily. And you can see that there's widespread importation and distribution of commercial ginseng seed across Appalachia. And we pay attention to these kinds of things. And so when we look at and ask people about the source of their ginseng planting materials in a state like Pennsylvania, this is the response. It's coming from everywhere. And just like the roots that are going, the off roots that are going into the medicinal root market, it's a very convoluted market, and even the people that are saying it's coming from North Carolina are just buying it from North Carolina and it's coming from somewhere else. So it's a very convoluted process with all this germplasm, and it really kind of underlines where we're at historically right now, which is we don't know what the native material looks like or genetically how it tests out. Okay? Most people in Pennsylvania think that this is a non-issue, right? That genetic conservation is just kind of academic or government kind of boogeyman stuff. And so they say ginseng is like people, it's all blended at this point, so don't worry about it. Okay? Final point I'll make, however, is that we do need to think about this. I think about it, and many people across the range think about it, because American ginseng, Panax quinquefolius, is native to eastern North America. So we have a responsibility to not just conserve the morphology of the plant, but the genetics of the plant. And this is a paper by Daniel Zellner, published years ago, that points out that there are unconscious processes at work when we talk about domestication and selection of plant material. So we don't yet know what the consequences are of people harvesting out that local material from their forest lands and then replacing it with propagated material that comes from places like Wisconsin or Ontario. Okay? And it remains to be seen whether that has any consequences to the long-term adaptiveness of the plant, but also to some of the things like the bioactive constituents. With that, I'm done.